All right, everyone. The main news of the day, of course, is fairly obvious. India and Pakistan are now going at it. They're clashing currently. Both of them are basically on a war footing at this point. India decided to strike targets in Pakistan, claiming to eliminate terrorists after there was a major terrorist attack in the Kashmir province on the Indian side of the border. This is a contested piece of land that has been one of the main flashpoints in the world, along with like the Levant, Israel, Palestine, and the Korean Peninsula, one of the main flashpoints in the entire world for a very, very long time. See, when Britain decided to divide India and Pakistan, it did so partially with the wisdom that Pakistan would be predominantly Islamic and India would be predominantly Hindu. Unfortunately, there's one province left that hasn't been fully determined. Both sides claim the entire thing. As a result, you have clashes sometimes. This is a fairly major clash, a major escalation. India gets hit by a terrorist attack, blames Pakistan, then fires on Pakistani targets with missiles and actually runs fighter jets over in the Kashmiri region and bombs targets. Now Pakistan is saying it's on a war footing and mobilizing and shot down at least one Indian fighter jet, although I predict that it's probably more than just one of them, um, because they do have anti-air systems, of course. Everyone calling for calm, literally the rest of the world saying, whoa, you're both nuclear powers. It's probably a good idea to calm down a little bit. Unfortunately, dozens of people dead on both sides of the well, what you could loosely call a border, I suppose. Commercial aircraft, apparently, they were rerouting themselves around Pakistan because they were afraid of getting blown out of the sky, mistaken for being a military aircraft, actually. This has happened before. You've had border skirmishes. You had an incident a few years ago in which I believe Pakistani troops began firing on a border patrol station. India returned fire. I think there were several casualties there. That's just a skirmish. This is more than a skirmish. When you begin firing missiles and running fighter jets, that's a little bit more beefy. India meanwhile, has responded by holding nationwide drills, actually, emergency drills, in order to prepare and fortify against the possibility of war. The Pakistani defense minister just a few days ago came out and said, effectively, we are at war. This is the most significant escalation that you've seen in a very long time. So there's always the worry in any singular instance, it is unlikely that two states armed with nuclear weapons are actually going to go to war with one another because the repercussions are so severe. So that's the good news. The bad news is that if you have this happen over and over and over again, let's say that you roll the dice, the likelihood that you land on 20, let's say that this is one of those, gaming dice is fairly low. It's like, 1 in 20 or something like that. It depends on how many sides are on the dice, but you get the idea. But if you roll it repeatedly, eventually you land on 20. This is the problem with nuclear powers getting into hot conflicts with one another. At any given singular instance, there is a low possibility that the chain of events goes so catastrophically wrong that a nuclear war ends up happening. But over time, you would expect, generally speaking, eventually you would get that lineup. This would be the equivalent of rolling 23 times in a row, for example, or 4 times in a row. Is it likely to happen? You're not even likely to roll 20 on the first roll. That's great. It's sort of like a nuclear weapon, ironically speaking. Nuclear weapons have various safeguards on them. For example, there was that one famous incident where a B-52 accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb in, I believe it was North Carolina. And of course, it thuds into the ground and doesn't go off, thankfully. It turns out that all but one of the off switches was actually not off. It turns out that there was one last safeguard that saved several million people from being irradiated, which is good news for the people in that region. And that happened, I believe, in the 1960s, if I remember correctly. because the other safeguards failed. They didn't work. That's pretty bad news, by the way, that I'm hoping that they advance their safeguard technology in the wake of this, not without good reason. India and Pakistan, thankfully, are not likely to go into a full-scale war. If they did, I would expect India generally to prevail. It is larger, it has much more manpower, it has more nuclear weapons of a more sophisticated design, and a beefier military capability. But is this really what we want? Because, you could have 500 million people killed in the process. Because eventually, if Pakistan were losing, it would fire its nuclear weapons, and then India would fire its nuclear weapons. Yay, the entire subcontinent is now a series of craters. How wonderful for the world. Then, all of the remnant population would be desperately impoverished, irradiated, and fucked up, and become refugees. There are going to be some people, I am sure, short-sighted, I suppose, that say, well, I don't care if the Pajeets and Ragheads die and stuff like that. Okay. How many millions of them are going to come to the United States? Because they will come. They will be capable of that. They'll enter through all avenues. What about overrunning parts of Europe? Or they can just sit there and squalor and we'll have to pay for them for the next 100 years. I don't want a nuclear war. If we're going to have a nuclear war, let every country with nuclear weapons just fire off tens of thousands of them in all directions and just vaporize the goddamn surface of the world and put us all out of our misery. That would be my policy goal. Otherwise, keep your cock in your pants, so to speak, don't need to whip it out and whirl it around and piss on everybody. So, India and Pakistan, they're technically speaking in a stage beyond simple skirmish at this point. Now, the hope, and Trump has weighed in and said basically, well, this is regrettable. I hope that it stops soon. And the U.S. needs to immediately weigh in. I think Rubio has already done so as well and said basically, you guys need to calm down. Other countries have weighed in. I don't think that anyone in the world really benefits from India and Pakistan coming to full blows even if it was non-nuclear, even if it was just a standard war, you're still looking at hundreds of thousands of soldiers that die, and of course there'll be hundreds of thousands of civilians as collateral damage. This is being conservative. This is a bare minimum sort of estimate. And the depletion of both nations' capabilities, and possibly their entire destabilization. Problem is that both India and Pakistan currently have nationalistic governments. Nationalistic and, in some cases, at least vaguely, authoritarian governments have a problem with being able to back down from conflict because of the way they've structured themselves. India has an additional problem, which is the Muslim minority within the country. Pakistan has an additional problem with being considerably smaller with a lot less manpower. So, you've got a little bit of a contraposition there, as usual within politics though we're hoping that they don't come to blows. Sane people are not cheering on their continued aggression towards one another. It's like, hey guys, you're gonna be neighbors. You may not like your neighbor all the time. That doesn't mean that you need to haul off and punch them in the face. That's about all. Peace out.